think we can get started, yeah? Yeah, so today we're fortunate to have two folks from Warner Brothers Discovery. Koya here is a Senior Director of the Data Platform Engineering and Operations. And we have Susheel I did it right the first time, Lakshmipathi, who's a data engineer on the team. And they'll tell us how they handle the merging of the two Databricks accounts from Warner Brothers and Discovery when the companies merged using Unity Catalog. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Greetings, everyone. So we're going to cover primarily around how we leveraged Unity Catalog across multiple accounts and walk you through our journey on how we evolved from where we were to where we are today. So before I start that, what is your favorite show in Max today? Any of you? What are you watching right now in Max? Succession? Curb Enthusiasm, okay, all right. Gold Rush? Anybody watching Gold? Did anyone watch Gold Rush? All right. Like me, any of you old-timers watching Friends still? All right, good. With that, we'll jump in. So I have my partner here, Susheel. Susheel is part of my team, and he's an engineer here. So he's in the nitty-gritty details of implementing a lot of this as well. So we'll give you a journey of WBD. So before coming to the Warner Brothers Discovery, we have multiple brands. You all probably familiar with it, right? Turner and Warner Brothers itself and Discovery. And so when we are bringing all these brands together, each brand has its own data platform coming into the merger and integration, right? So when you have each brand have its own data platform, all the data is kind of segregated into multiple areas, right? So each has its own governance processes, each has its own security, privacy methodologies, and over the years, each brand has data growth increasing year over year, right? Each brand has a lot of viewership, and the data itself is growing in the marketplace as well. So when we bring the data on how there are different metrics that we look into when it comes to an media company, right? So how many viewers, what they're watching, what is the best way for us to advertise, and all that. So for that, we also need to depend on a lot of second and third party data as well. So it's not just the first party data, it's also the second party data. When I say first party data that we produce ourselves within the organization is the first party data. Data that we gather from second parties, like it is our data, but someone else gathers our data. And third party data is completely third party data, like Nielsen, for example, right? We will depend on them. So. And then our okay, all right, sounds good. So this is the data growth over past years, right? So as I was telling you, we have two types of data sets that are coming into the media platform, right? One, the data that we generate from the apps, right? Max app, when you're watching Max app, there are lots of events that it generates, and all that streaming data that we gather is one thing. So the data has millions of records every single day, billions of records every single day, every single hour, in fact, right? So accumulates over the hours. And as the days progress, the billions and billions and billions will grow into petabytes of the data that we deal with, right? And there is also data. There are two types of problems we run into: the volume of the data and the variety of the data. So in case of the first party data sets, we have a lot of billions of records, billions of events coming in, where there is a problem of volume, right? There is also a variety. When we gather the data from the second and third party data sets, we receive data from multiple vendors, and each vendor actually produces multiple types of data sets. So just to give you the magnitude of data that we produced from the second and third-party data sets. We have at least 60 different vendors giving us the data, and each vendor at least giving 10 other data sets, right? 10 types of data sets. So 60 into 10 is like 600 data sets in addition to the first-party data that we produce. So this is the data we deal with. And in addition to the data, when we are bringing multiple teams together, we also have multiple engineering teams also coming together, right? The data itself is growing, the consumers, engineers that are using the data is also growing, and number of use cases are being increasing, and the introduction of AI and ML, we have to leverage and use all kinds of this data in a very effective manner, right? So when we have multiple accounts, each brand bringing up their own account, coming into the measures and integrations and all that, right? So we have scattered data sets and with their own security and governance methodologies. And the data for us to do analytics across the organization, across the brands, for example, right? So when we stream all these different brands through a streaming or DTC app, we need to produce metrics. So we need to get the data in a shared manner. So this introduces a use case of where and how we get the data from one side of the house to the other side of the house. That is a problem. And you all know, right, when we have 4 different engineering teams, we all code differently. We don't code the same way, right? We all like different tool sets. We all like different languages. We all like different standards. We all like, one likes one tab indent. Some people like 2 tabs indents. And there are different standards, right? We all produced, we came in with a lack of platform or a process standardization. And the discoverability is also becoming a challenge, right? So when we have, I'm just taking an example of 4 different data teams coming together, right? When you have 4 different accounts coming in, right? You won't be able to see what other team is doing, and then you need to go to the governance process of that brand and trying to access their catalog. So the discoverability is becoming a very big challenge, and the data democratization suffers in that space. And most importantly, as a data organization or a data platform, monetizing the cost becomes a lot more difficult, right? So we have 4 different walled gardens now, and the walled garden 1 doesn't know what is happening in walled garden 2, and walled garden 2 doesn't know what happens in walled garden 3, and then any data that we need to share between these walled gardens has to go through the governance process. And it introduces collaboration challenges and introduces friction and all that, right? So as part of the Max launch, we looked at all the different things and how can we effectively leverage all the best things that we have, and how do we bring all these teams together? How do we bring the standardizations together? And this we have to prep to the scale of the platform. Data governance is the first thing, right? So it is a lot of event data that we're receiving. So we need to protect the customer privacy, and we have to ensure data is being shared and analytics are being anonymized. So what we do is we take out all the PII data and anonymize with a token, and we ensure before we pass it on to the analytics, right? We ensure all the data is anonymized, so no single record is actually identifiable back to a customer. So that's the one thing that we need to do, right? And we also need to standardize it, right? So we have to have a standardized tool set, right? What is the best tool sets that we have, and how do we ensure and convince all the engineering teams to leverage the technologies and the tool sets in best possible way, and automation as well. So we have to scale. We have to add a new channel to the stream, and we have to really automate that, and onboarding a new team onto the data platform and enabling them access to all the data and enabling them with all the metrics is also another challenge. And cost monitoring and optimization. So media industry is very competitive, right? So we have to produce the data in a very competitive manner, right? We need to give we need to measure the per petabyte processing cost and ensure that we're processing data in a much more efficient way. And we're a medium-sized company, and we have thousands of engineers that directly work on the platform, and we have thousands of explorers that depend on our data to analyze and derive metrics out of it, or recommendations, personalizations, and insights out of it, right? So we need to ensure the data is self-serviceable manner. People are getting onto the platform self-serviceable manner. When we have a new engineer joining a team, we need to ensure that engineer has very similar access to every other engineer that the team is part of, right? We need to ensure the privacy. At the same time, we need to enable the data democracy as well. I think this is the biggest challenge that we wanted to balance and make this data platform very efficient for us. So this is our legacy architecture. And I think someone here asking, hey, are you talking about one Databricks account or multiple Databricks accounts bringing into one Databricks account? Or are you also talking about multiple AWS accounts underneath it? So I don't want to, it's both, right? We have multiple AWS accounts going into this release. We have multiple Databricks accounts because we have multiple brands that are taking the engineering in as their own data platform, right? Before the merger and integration. So we worked with different teams, and if you look at this, right, there are different workspaces: workspace 1, workspace 2, workspace 3, workspace 4. So every team has their own workspace, and every team has enabled direct AD integration, enabled SSO integration with the AD directly, and workspace 1, onboarding to workspace 1 is totally different from onboarding to workspace 2, is totally different from onboarding to workspace 3. So if I onboarded to workspace 1, I don't have any access to the 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'm isolated to workspace 1 itself. And any data I need to share or any data I need to access from workspace 2, I need to work with the team in the workspace 2 and get that share established, and so on. So it's becoming much more challenging for us. So we worked with our Databricks partnership and evolved into how we can leverage all the different things that we have and how we can leverage the Unity catalog. And we came up with an architecture such a way that, we removed the workspace level scheme integration to the account level scheme integration. Right now, the scheme integration at the account level. And underneath AWS accounts can be different. So for us, the Unity catalog is based off of one meta store. We also have, if you go back to the earlier slide, right? So we have multiple meta stores here. So we went from multiple meta stores to one meta store with this Unity catalog. One meta store with the Unity catalog, and we moved all of our scheme integrations to the account level. So now it becomes very easy. So once I have access to the Databricks account, right? So it's up to, we can manage how we can grant access, and the data sharing is a lot more easier. It also brings several different things, right? So in later slides, Susheel will walk you through how we are tagging, how we are measuring the cost of each team, how we are tagging the cost of each business service, and this also enabled one other good thing like lineage, right? How the data is flowing from one place to the other. When you have 5 different meta stores, the lineage is becoming much more challenging, right? So you can probably get the lineage within that workspace itself, but it becomes very hard for you to figure out how the data is flowing from one to the other. And you also create a governance challenge, right? Once your data is shared from one workspace to the other workspace, right? When you have different meta stores, it's all or nothing. So it's up to the other meta store and how they manage it. You lose control over how the data being utilized. So you will not have, you will be encouraging a lot of duplication with the with individual meta store based workspace. With this architecture, you can avoid a lot of data duplication. Data is one of the current structure is, the scheme authentication authorization is at the Unity catalog level, and One of the workspaces here you can consider as the data platform core workspace, where we have all core data in there. And then all the other workspaces are business services workspaces. Like each business service will be consuming or accessing the data and producing the data sets that are domain-specific data sets. Those data sets actually can be shared back to the data platform, or it can be shared with anybody else who wants those specific data sets. So with this model, we were able to achieve several different things. I think you probably heard Unity Catalog in several sessions today, even in the keynote, right? Better governance, better lineage, better security, and easier onboarding. Right now, I think for earlier, when we need to onboard a new engineer, when a new engineer comes onto the board, right, he needs to figure out, he needs to reach multiple teams to get access. Now it's very easy. As soon as an engineer comes into a specific team, we just need to add to the Okta group of that specific team, and he gets all the roles and responsibilities of that team automatically. And there are some specific, I think in one simple way, we went from 4 different walled gardens to one walled garden, right? And within that one walled garden, we also have a PII vault, right? As I said, all the data within the walled garden is tokenized. There is no PII data that can be visible by default to anybody, even within the walled garden, right? So the PII data is governed much more strictly, and only very limited people will have access to the PII data. The people who are actually doing the tokenization and the people who are actually doing the IRR processing are the only people who will have access to that PIR data. So that's at a high level, and Susheel will walk through on how we implemented. I covered what portion, and he's going to cover how we actually did it. Thank you, Susheel.
Thank you, Ram, and thanks everyone for being here at this hour today. So I'll start off where Ram left off. Is this too loud? No? All right. Ideally, the primary thing that we really achieved with Unity Catalog is segregating the parts that need to be segregated by business service, while having a common area for things that need to be horizontal across all business services, right? So like it was already covered, the identity provider is the same, the single point of entry for anybody being onboarded, the metastore is the same, data is shareable across the organization, and authorization for different groups on different data sets is also centralized. What's not centralized is resources, which incur cost and have to be attributed to the respective business service. What's another benefit is that those resources are not going to be contended against. So different business streams have their own workspace, literally, to operate out of. And I'll get into the details of how we kind of implemented this. What are the direct benefits, and how, this is how we're looking today, essentially. All right, so the biggest thing that I would say is, Unity Catalog has helped platform engineering achieve a level of automation that not just automation, it's a architecture that allows for us to have that horizontal across the organization, right? So platform engineering essentially is able to cover 4 essential points that are listed here: is to capture infrastructure as code, to maintain access governance, maintain release pipelines for infrastructure as code primarily, and also keep track of cost monitoring. Now, if we look at how platform engineering benefited from Unity Catalog, we were essentially able to automate at the workspace level how each workspace should look for for multiple tenants or single tenant. And Unity Catalog fit right into it with allowing us to create a dedicated data space for each workspace, which is also accessible outside the workspace. So let me just, I guess, cover what a workspace bootstrap or a team bootstrap would do. Essentially, a push-button solution using infrastructure as code to deploy a workspace, deploy associated Okta groups, all the cloud provider integrations required for the workspace and the resources. And, and the final point there is the most crucial point, is connecting it to the Unity Catalog metastore. So that workspace is not just an isolated unit, it's also part of the, a part of the organization along with Unity Catalog. A team bootstrap would probably consist more of like how individual business service or a business function gets their operating space within a workspace. And that would consist of like a catalog, a certain set of service principals, any compute resources required for it. One point that I'll also cover is that we associate a dedicated S3 bucket for a catalog, which kind of helps segregate data for each team. I'll cover a little more of that in the cost attribution, but it allowing segregation of resources where it's required while maintaining commonality where it's required is essentially the agenda. How platform engineering achieved that is what you're seeing right now, and how Unity Catalog helped in achieving that is essentially, how we used Unity Catalog to achieve that. So I'll go into 3 of these main points: access governance, how we use release pipelines, and how we use cost monitoring. With respect to access governance, right, the biggest thing was making sure that we have a single identity provider and not have to have different points of entry for onboarding onboarding the same users, same teams multiple times. And also this covers the authorization of data at a single point. Data ownership. So now that, unlike in the legacy space where we have a different metastore and a different identity provider per workspace, anyone who's publishing data is limited to their workspace, and they're essentially not able to share data seamlessly within the organization. With Unity Catalog, the fact that we can associate different catalogs to different teams, it really enhances their ownership on their own data, allowing better democracy in the end of the day for teams to be able to share data, for them to authorize other teams or restrict other teams. And one last thing that also helped abstract away one layer of access governance is catalog managed tables. So Unity Catalog helped with essentially the feature called managed tables, where you're not creating external tables anymore. You're creating a regular table like you would in a relational database. What this really helped with is, in the case of multiple accounts especially, if you have a table sitting in an S3 bucket and a different one sitting in a completely different S3 bucket, you're required to grant access on multiple levels, one at the metastore and one at the underlying S3 bucket. So what this essentially helped abstract away for us is using Unity Catalog, managed tables, access is only regulated at the metastore level. All associating S3 and AWS resources are folded up into the metastore access. So, so the data owner has authority over their catalog, and that's the only one that they need. They don't need to, again, go into the cloud provider and continue or have two different points of granting access. So those are some of the key governance benefits of using Unity Catalog that we saw. Going into how we're standardizing across our environments is essentially using infrastructure as code and a release pipeline model that ensures that workspaces, catalogs, access control lists, and any associated resources are consistently deployed across. This really benefits with standardization. It is something that we can achieve on a previous isolated workspaces, but having catalogs and having having the ability to create different catalogs that Unity Catalog provides us really helps create standard workspaces, including a dedicated catalog per team, and that really ensures that even if everyone has their own isolated workspace, they still have a standard environment that they're operating out of, and how they can share data. So this is just a screenshot of how you could sequentially deploy to multiple AWS environments. But one last benefit here is also that having code, infrastructure as code, and having your catalog configurations and workspace configurations as infrastructure as code allows a self-serve model for different teams. So on the one hand, you could bootstrap a team, providing them all the bare minimum resources that they need, but having all of this as infrastructure as code in Git allows them to self-request a PR to make any changes to their catalogs or to their resources that they got by default. So this is some of the deployment of how we used Unity Catalog in our environment. Finally, another benefit is better cost attribution. So using release pipelines, we're able to achieve standardization. Using Unity Catalog, we're able to achieve segregation of data storage, although it is still available seamlessly across workspaces. So the key point there is that we are able to have a standard deployment, so we can have a standard tagging structure. And we are also, and Unity Catalog allows us to segregate data in its underlying storage. So the cost attribution for the data storage can also be standardized. That way we get a lot clearer picture of not just the compute resources that a particular team is using or the environment resources, but they're also considering storage, which earlier with one metastore, you would have to explicitly segregate each table's external location to a different bucket, and then you'll also have to make sure that resources have access to those different buckets to achieve the same level of storage segregation for cost attribution. Those are some of the main points that how we implemented Unity Catalog and how we benefited from it. In the end, what this allowed us to do is we were able to onboard multiple different teams from multiple different organizations onto the same account, be it an existing Databricks account and workspace, Databricks workspace, or be it a workspace that is based off of a different AWS account. We're able to onboard them into a common environment where they're able to share their data, maintain standards, achieve cost optimization, cost attribution, and also standardized governance with a self-serve model. we were able to make data sharing further easier because now that they're on a common environment, you're able to seamlessly share data that they own, that individual teams own. Yeah, and this directly and indirectly helps in essentially achieving a single data platform. Post-merger, that was one of the big challenges, and I think Unity Catalog, in the end of the day, really helped with some of the key points in getting to that target. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. Thank you.